Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the assembled Vaishnavi devotees. We thank you all for being here. Today we have His Grace SALIKA Prabhu who will be speaking to us. If you saw the poster, that might not be the case, but in reality, this is what is happening. His Grace is the one speaking, SALIKA Prabhu. And SALIKA Prabhu, thank you for, as always, taking up this service to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. I think we have 4 verses today. So we'll put the verse on the screen, the verses on the screen, and you take it over.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritam Narachavam Narottama. Devi Saraswati Vyasam Tatu Jarani. Master Prayesu Abhajesu Nityam Bhagavatam Seva Bhagavati Uttamam Sloke Bhagavati Naistiti. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 10. We are reading text number 18 to 21. Sadime Brakta Saga Vaikritam Apilesrinam Rajubaju Bhagavato Lileyam Arimedasa. Translation. All the above are natural creations by the external energy of the Lord. Now hear from me about the creations by Brahman, who is an incarnation of the mode of passion, and who, in the matter of creation, has a brain like that of the personality of Godhead. Text number 19. Saptamo Mukhya Sargastu Sadvidas Tatu Santa Aya Vanaspati Ushadi Lata Vatsara Virudo Ujumaha. Translation. The 7th creation is that of the immovable entities, which are of 6 kinds. The fruit trees without flowers, trees and plants which exist until the fruit is ripe, creepers, high plants, creepers which have no supports, and trees with flowers and fruits. Text number 20. Utsrota sastama praya antapa spasa visesina. Translation. All the immovable trees and plants seek their subsistence upwards and are almost unconscious but have feelings of pain within. They are manifested in variegatedness. And text number 21. Tirakskam astama sarga sostavim sadvidomata avido burita amaso vyanadna irvi avedina. Word for word translation. Tiraskam, species of lower animals. Astamaha, the 8th. Sargaha creation. Sa they are. Astavim Sat 28. Vidaha varieties. Mataha considered. Avidaha without knowledge of tomorrow. Uri extensively. Tamasa ignorant. Vyanagna can note desirables by smell. Vidi Abedina can remember very little in the arts. Purport by divine grace, like isi back to the rental swami, the definition about. In the Vedas, the symptoms of the lower animals are described as follows. Ate taraisam pus pasunam asano pipase ivabi vignam na vignam vidati na vignatam pasyanti na vidu swastanam na loka iti jadva buri tamaso bahu rusha yane naiva janati vidyaham prati swapriyam vastu iva vindati bojana sayanadi artam vinanti. Lower animals have knowledge only of their hunger and taste. They have no acquired knowledge, no vision. Their behavior exhibits no dependence and formalities. Extensively ignorant, they can know their desirables only by smells. And by such intelligence only can they understand what is favorable and unfavorable. Their knowledge is concerned only with eating and sleeping. Therefore, even the most ferocious lower animals, such as tigers, can be tamed simply by regularly supplying meals and accommodation for sleeping. Only snakes cannot be tamed by such an arrangement. Omagyanam timiram dasya, Ganam shalataya, Chakshu Mutam Dinatasmai Shri Gurave, Sri Chaitanya Manubhiskam Stapitam Dinabhutale, Swayam Vitam Padamayam Dadati Swam Padantikam, Vandiyam Sri Guru Sri Vita Padam Kamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavam Shah, Sri Rupam Sabrajatam Sadhana Radhinatam Pitam Tam Sahajam, Sadhitam Sabadhitam, Hariganam Saritam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sadhana Malika Sri Krishna Padam Shah, Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapati, Gopisha Gopika Kakanta Radha Kanta Namostute, Tata Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Vishavan Sudhevi Pranamami Maripi, Vancha Karpa Taru Vyasta Kripa Sandhya Sivasta, Patitanam Pavashnebhyo Vashna Devyo Namo Namah. Mukankaroti Vachalam Pandam Lagarati Girim, Yatripatam Vande Sri Guru Natarina, Jai Sri Krishna Jai Sri Taya, Prabhu Nityananda, Siyadita Grada, Sivasari Gura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The eighth creation is that of the lower species of life, and they are of different varieties, numbering 28. They are all extensively foolish and ignorant. They know their desirables by smells, but are unable to remember anything within the heart. Hare Krishna. So, everybody, thank you very much for being here. I thank you for giving this opportunity to be with the devotees once again after a long time. In the Bhagavad, before going into the conversation for today, I want to express deep appreciation for His Grace for holding brief, because somehow or other, due to unavoidable responsibilities, I've been away for so long, and so we have to deal with so many, struggling with so much of the activities together. We pray that Guru and Krishna will continue to empower him to keep this Sangha alive. So today, we are actually supposed to be hearing from His Holiness the Kavichandra Swami Maharaj. But Maharaj, as we speak, is airborne, traveling to India, so he could not speak. So therefore, I had this great opportunity to speak and share realization on these 4 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam 3rd Canto, chapter 10. And I pray that I will be able to say something that will be of a benefit to all of the devotees and for my own purification also. So the verses that we're reading are continuation of discussions or highlights about the creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when I was looking at this verse, the chapter 10 of the Bhagavad Gita was coming to mind. When Lord Krishna was telling Arjuna, when Lord Krishna was explaining the various opulences of his manifestation. And at one point, Lord Krishna asked to tell Arjuna, what is the use of all of these opulences? Just by one of my opulences, innumerable planets and manifestation manifest. The opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is what is being described in the text that we are reading. When we look at this verse and the preceding verse, I need to open this verse. When we look at the verse of this Srimad Bhagavatam, the title, the subtitle of this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about the divisions of the creations. And when we look from the beginning, when Vidura started speaking, he was asking, he wants to know how Lord Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of the living entities from his own body and mind after the disappearance of the prelude to this conversation. And as we go from that inquiry of Vidura, the great sage Maitreya Muni is trying to explain the various stages of creation. And in our material experience, the scientists are striving so hard to manipulate the creation of Lord Brahma, to make so many things manifest. Few hundred years back, nobody can imagine the kind of skyscrapers that we see spread across the globe today. But this is the creative energy of the living entity, because they derive their creative energy from the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like Lord Brahma, Lord Material Muni is not Brahma. When we look at the text number, 19 of this verse, no. Natural creations by the external energy of the Lord. Now hear from me about the creation by Brahma, who is an incarnation of the mode of passion, and who in the matter of creation has a brain like that of the personality of Godhead. Because Lord Brahma derives his creation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his creation is likened to that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the living entities also are trying to create so many things. And in our endeavor to create, because of our minute nature, we create so much anxiety that puts us off our balance. When we look at the creation of the Brahma, and we look at our present lives, one can understand the creation of the Brahma. From the time we were giving birth to, and we start developing the senses, the sense of creation that is within us, impel us to try to create something. And in our endeavor to create something, we create so much turbulence in our individual lives and our collective lives. Just before this class, I was in a forum. We are having a pre-discussion. It's a conference of international, it's an international conference of advancement of democracy in Africa. It's a 2-day conference that is happening in Abuja tomorrow next. And some of us who are supposed to be the panelists were having some back-end conversation before the real event starts tomorrow. In that event, there is going to be several heads of states from African countries. And the focus is democracy in Africa. When we look at the system of democracy and what the leaders of society are trying to do, and when we look at what we read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, for one who is a devotee, he can see the limitations of the conditioned soul in trying to create something. In these particular 4 verses that we're reading about this creation of the bodies of the lower species of life. They are said to be ignorant and foolish. But even the living entities who are supposedly having a higher intelligence are also foolish in a gross level. Because when we look at the world today, when we look at our individual life, the most important thing in the life of every living entity is that he wants to become happy. Everybody, the natural conditional state of the living entity is that Ananda Maya Biasat, he wants to be happy. He wants to because being part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead whom Lord Brahma described in the beginning of his Upanishad to be Sat Chit Ananda, the characteristics of the Supreme Personality of God, as described by Lord Brahma, who came to realization, is that he is of eternality, he has knowledge, and is blissful. And because the living entity are fragmental part and parcel of the Lord, they also have this nature, and this is their original constitutional nature. But because of this tendency to create independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity in the material world are creating so much of turbulent situation. It is not wrong for the living entity to desire to create. The impetus to create is not wrong. Just like we read in this text number 18 of the verse that we are reading, Lord Brahma is creating in one of the modes of material nature called passion. But that is not alien, that is not unnatural, because that creative energy is coming from the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. And when we get to the text number 21 that we're reading today, materialism is telling that these living entities by nature are foolish and ignorant because their ability to understand is so limited. In the Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, text number 58, Machita Sarva Dugani, in that purport of that verse, Lord Srila Prabhupada, he mentioned that every living entity in this material world, Sadi Prabhu, if you can bring that verse up, Bhagavad Gita 1858, Srila Prabhupada explained in the purport of that verse that every living entity in this material world does not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. This is the conditional nature. Thank you. Machita Sarvadu Garani, attache Twam, Ankara, now so shall see, the purport is where we're going. Yeah, okay. A person in full Krishna consciousness is undoubtedly anxious about, it's not unduly anxious about executing the duties of his existence. The foolish cannot understand this great freedom from all anxiety. For one who acts in Krishna consciousness, Lord Krishna becomes the most intimate friend. He always looks after his friends, and he gives himself to his friend, who is so devotedly engaged, working 24 hours a day to please the Lord. Therefore, no one should be carried away. Go. No one should be carried away. I'm trying to go to that. Therefore, no one should be carried away by the false ego or bodily concept of life. One should not firstly think himself independent of the laws of material nature or free to act. He is already under the strict material laws. But as soon as he acts in Krishna consciousness, is liberated, free from the material perplexity, one should note very carefully that one who is not active in Krishna consciousness is losing himself in the material world, in the ocean of birth and death. No conditioned soul, that is where we're going. No conditioned soul actually knows what is to be done and what is not to be done. But a person in Krishna consciousness. So this is the point. Not just that the living entities in the lower species of life, but even every living entity in the material world lacks the ability to know what to be done and what is not to be done. Only person that is free from conditional situation is one who is engaged in Krishna consciousness. When we look at the lower entities, because of their limitations, they follow instincts as given by nature. But because living entity has a little bit of higher intelligence, it foolishly, out of false ego, thinks it can act independently. And the whole material world is in turmoil just because of this mentality of independency. But the living entity is actually not independent. It's independent, is under the dependence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So no one is actually fully independent, because the independency of the living entity is dependent on this supreme independence of the supreme personality of God. Only one who understands this can act without, like Prabhupada said in that purport, only such a person is free from undue anxiety. In other words, unless one takes shelter of Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is no freedom from anxiety. The part of bhakti, the part of devotion, is to take us to that platform. When we get to that platform, then we can start talking about bhakti. Bhakti is the ultimate goal of life, but no one can come to the platform of bhakti unless he transcends this conditional state of thinking, of intending to do something. The living entity in the material world is always perplexed, and his perplexity is as a result of his desire to always try to create. A devotee does not try to do anything because he is inspired by the Lord, and he acts under the directions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And just like Prabhupada will give example, a banker who is a cashier is not in anxiety whether money is increasing or is lessening. His duty is that he collects and he gives. One who is a devotee acts under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so therefore is free from anxiety. The tendency is that the living entity in the material body thinks himself very high, and because of this mentality, is always frustrated. When we look at the life of the living entity, it goes through the 4 miseries of life. These 4 miseries of life, characterized by birth, old age, disease, and death. No one can surmount it unless one takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of God in Krishna consciousness. And that is the ultimate goal of life. But no one can get to that ultimate goal of life unless he becomes free. And this freedom to act is only possible for somebody who has attained that level of what? Freedom from anxiety. And anxiety cannot be free from the conditional life of existence unless one understands this fact that the ability is only available under the ability of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is what Krishna told Arjuna in chapter 7, verse 8 of Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna told Arjuna that Rasoham, that what is that last stanza? The verse starts with Soham. So can you bring up Bhagavad Gita 7:8? Rasoham, what is that? Bhagavad Gita 7:8. Yeah. Thank you. Rasoam Apsukam Teya Pravasmi Surya Pranava Sarva Vedesh Sabdake Purusho Nerishu. That is what we know. Scroll up. Thank you. That is where Purusham, ability. Krishna says that I have this ability in man. The ability to do anything is only in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one has any ability. The living entities thinking that it can act or it can make things happen, it is ignorant, it is foolishness. One who is in Krishna consciousness and understand that there is no ability for anyone except that ability that is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one can act. Action, activity, creation are all the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, this process of Krishna consciousness is making us to become understandable that our position as living entity is that of humility. When one understands this, it becomes completely free from anchoring and lamentations. The material world is full with lamentation and anchoring because everybody is trying to act, but there is no ability to act in any capacity. And that is why the Bhagavatam is said to be the light for the guide, because there is practically no activity that living entity needs to perform that is not already given by the Supreme Personality of God. Sometimes the word, like I was explaining earlier on, tomorrow we'll be spending a whole 2 days. We're trying to find solutions to the deficiency in the governance of the living entities in Africa, African democracy development in Africa. And I was sharing with someone this afternoon, discussion to that conference, that there is nothing. All these conferences, gathering are all unnecessary waste of time. Why? Because whatever needed to be done has been given by the Supreme Personality of God, but the living entities are not going to listen. And because of this, their deafness to the voice of the Supreme Personality of God as given in the scriptures, in the world scriptures, are the reason why we are confused. And then we continuously have conferences upon conferences. If you look at the kind of resources that is invested in conferences globally, annually, one will be amazed. But at the end of all of these conferences, what we experience is that there is an increase in violence, there is an increase in disharmony, there is a deep increase in sufferings of the living entity. As the living entity is trying to solve one problem, another problem is manifesting. Why? Because the living entity has refused to listen to the Supreme Personality of God. The living entity can only become happy, it can be blissful only when it listens to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of God. The whole essence of the Vidura's conversation with Maitreya here is to bring us to this understanding. And that is what Lord Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita 18:54. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na soshati na kankshati samasabeshu bhukteshu mabhatim labate param. That Brahma Bhuta, unless one comes to the Brahma Bhuta platform, when one is free from anchoring, anxiety, lamentation, one can never be peaceful. And one who is not peaceful in heart cannot engage in bhakti. He cannot engage in anything meaningful within his life, individually or collectively. No activities of satisfaction to the soul, because the living entity is essentially Brahma or spirit soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of God, and nothing else can satisfy him until he comes to that spiritual platform. But all of this knowledge, and that is what Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, that what is the use of all of this? When Krishna was from chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita to chapter 10, Lord Krishna was giving different opulences, how he is present in everything. But at the end, he told Arjuna, what is the use of all of this openness? Just by the stroke of his hand, everything is manifesting. And that is why he told Arjuna in the conclusion in the Shatushloki of Bhagavad Gita, Am Sabasya Prabhava, Mata Sarva Pravatate, Iti Matro Bhajante Mam, Buddhabhava Samavita, that everything is manifesting, is happening by my supreme self. Both animate, inanimate, everything is coming from me. And only those who knows this are peaceful. And because they are peaceful, they engage in the original activities of the soul. And that original activity of the soul is bhakti. So when we read the Srimad Bhagavatam, as we go through the Srimad Bhagavatam page to page, from one section of the Bhagavatam to the other section of the Bhagavatam, there are only one thing that is taking us to. And what is that only one thing? To understand that everything is centered around glorification of the Supreme Personality. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, chapter 3, text number 36, we find a very interesting statement where it is said that the Lord, whose activities are always spotless, is the master of the 6 senses and is fully omnipotent with 6 opulences. He creates the manifested universes, he maintains them, and he annihilates them without being in the least affected. He is within every living entity, every living being, and is always independent. This is the nature of the Supreme Personality of God. And in the purport, the Papa said, the prime difference between the Lord and the living entity is that the Lord is the creator and the living entities are the created. So here he is called the Amoga Lila, which indicates that there is nothing lamentable in his creation. Every creation of the living entity is fraught with some anxiety. There is no activity of the living entity that is no anxiety. You see that the anxiety is hidden in the beginning, it manifests in the middle, or it's hidden in the middle and beginning, and it manifests in the end. But at the end of everything, everything is ending up in lamentation. And that is the nature of material life. And so those who create disturbances in the creation are themselves disturbed. Papa further says that he is transcendental to all material afflictions because he is full with all six opulences, namely wealth, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, and thus is the master of all. So the supreme personality of Godhead is full in all six opulences, which the living entity does not have. So therefore, unless one actually is full in the six opulences of his movement, he cannot experience the bliss. So therefore, the acharyas have advised that one who wants to actually be free from anxiety should take to the process of devotional service. And this desire, unending desire to make happen, this does not mean that the living entity cannot desire, but one should desire in such a way that it aligns with the desire of the supreme personality of Godhead. That is what is real desire. Real desire means that one desires to create, just like Lord Brahma is doing. Lord Brahma is creating in the likeness of, in the mood of, as it is mentioned in that text number 18, Lord Brahma, who is, it is said that Lord Brahma, who is in the incarnation of the mode of passion, in the matter of creation, has a brain like that of the personality of Godhead. His brain is like that of the personality of Godhead. Why? Because it's deriving a source from there. And unless one draw, and we saw in the Lila of Lord Brahma's creation that whenever Lord Brahma tries to do independently anything, he finds himself, even the highest living entity, in a confused situation. But Lord Brahma, even when he was given the creative energy, he could not do anything with it. He was confused. He was lament. He was completely bewildered until he sat down, and when he heard the word Papa, he meditated. And after austerity, after so much of realization, only then he was able to realize and do what is expected of him. In other words, so therefore, the living entities in this material world can only become happy only when they take shelter of the supreme personality of God and act only in Krishna consciousness, as stated by Srila Prabhupada in the purport of that Bhagavad Gita verse that we quoted 1858, because the real activity of living entity is to surrender to the supreme personality of God. And that is why Lord Krishna, after speaking all of these verses of the Bhagavad Gita, concluded Sarva Dharma Parityaja Mamikam Sarana Vraja Hamtram Sarva Pahabhibhyo Mokshyami Syami Masucha, that one should simply surrender. In other words, the whole essence of the Bhagavatam is only focused on one thing, that we should become surrender to the supreme personality of God. That is the essence of the whole of the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. Whatever we read, whatever text, whatever purport, it's bringing us to one point, that we should remember that we are not independent. The real human existence, real human life begins when one comes to this understanding. And in the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, chapter 29, text number 27, Srila Prabhupada said that the living entities, according to different results of fruitful activities, may become rich or poor, but the supreme personality of Godhead is unchangeable. He is always full in six opulences, and treating a living entity equally does not mean treating him as one who treats the supreme personality of Godhead. So in the several verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the difference between the supreme personality of God and living entities are emphasized. They are emphasized because to bring us to the understanding that no one can actually independently act without the sanctioning of the supreme personality of God. Whatever one tries to engage in, when the Lord is not connected, when it's not connected to the Krishna in Krishna consciousness, it becomes a futile effort, and it leads into anxiety of different grades of anxiety. So, as we read this verse, the most important lesson to learn here is that as living entities, as we study this chapter, Canto 3, chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, talking about different the divisions of the creation of the Supreme Personality of God. The essence is to understand that the living entity derives its intelligence only when it is connected to the Supreme Personality of God. And only then can it experience some level of relief in the material world. For one who has taken this material body is doomed, whether he is in the mode of goodness or passion or ignorance, unless one comes to that point where he is in one of his purpose in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, in verse number 1, Prabhupada says something very interesting in the purpose. In the second paragraph, Prabhupada said that when Prabhupada was talking about the opulences of the Supreme Personality of God, Prabhupada explained that one may be poor, one may be rich, one may be average, whatever it is that one is. The humanity is always continuously poor because there's no one who can consistently be rich unless sorry. So Papa explains that the living entity has to come to this realization of the supreme position of the Supreme Personality of God and its minute nature. And that is why it is interesting when you see Prabhupada preach. Prabhupada will always start in the middle and in the end. Prabhupada will emphasize the hinosmiyata, the head. The living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of God. Your spirit soul. You're not this body. Krishna, Prabhupada, all preaching is focused on this thing. Whenever Prabhupada is preaching, whatever Prabhupada is saying, it reminds the living entity that we are not this body. We are spirit soul. And that is the essence of that is real knowledge. It is only at that level of knowledge that real human life begins. Until one comes to that platform, whereby it's only to understand Aham Brahmasmi. And that Brahmasmi begins realization. When one understands that he is eternally connected to the Supreme Personality of God, and every activities is only dependent on the grace, on the ability that is given by the Supreme Personality of God himself. So when in the text that we are reading, in the text number 19 and 20, when Maitreya is describing the seventh and the eighth creation, it's talking about the living entities who are immovable. They are detailed explanations of the creation of different bodies. But the most important lessons to be learned or to take home on these four verses is to understand that just like Prabhupada described in the text number 21 of these creations, Prabhupada said that extensively. He said, they have no acquired knowledge, no vision. Their behavior exhibits no dependence on formalities. Extensively ignorant, they can know they are desirable only by smell, and by such intelligence, only can they understand what is favorable and unfavorable. Their knowledge is concerned only with eating and sleeping. Therefore, even the most ferocious lower animals, such as tigers, can be tamed simply by regularly supplying meals and accommodations for sleeping. Only snake cannot be tamed by such an arrangement. And that's an interesting point in that thing. Why is it that the snake cannot be tamed? Why is the snake cannot be tamed? So therefore, sometimes we see that when somebody becomes too crooked, it is said to be snake-like. Because the living entity with the higher senses, which activities is based on eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, is so covered, although he thinks himself higher than the lower animals in these immovable entities, but his so-called higher intelligence is so covered that he forgets his original position. And because of the forgetfulness of his original position, he consistently binds himself in the ocean of repeated birth and death. So for the living entities in the material world, especially on the part of Bhakti, the essence of Bhagavatam class or studying the scriptures is to bring us to this understanding that we are independent, but that independence is minute. In other words, that independence that we think we have is dependent on the independency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when one comes to this understanding, only then, as Papa said, can one become free to act. And one who acts in that freedom, in Krishna consciousness, is truly free. And such a person, the kingdom of God becomes its rightful claim, even though it might take so many lifetimes. But one who acts in this consciousness ultimately attains the shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the summary of my understanding of this verse. So maybe there will be some questions, some comments, or some contributions to this verse. I would like to stop here to give room for that contribution. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much. His grace is like a Prabhu, as always. Lots of insights. Dear devotees, if anyone may have questions, comments, reflections, realizations you may want to ask or share, please indicate by using the hand emoji or your physical hand, and you'll be asked to unmute to ask your question or share your realizations and reflections. Hare Krishna. Well, Prabhu, I have this question. I wouldn't be surprised if a cat steals my fish because that is how it's designed. Cats like to steal fish. So we did text 18 through 21 today. And the text 17, if I may put it up here, Srila Prabhupada said something in the paper. This is text 17 of Canto 3, chapter 10. And it says, the fifth creation is that of the controlling deities by the interaction of the mode of goodness, of which the mind is the sum total. The sixth creation is the ignorant darkness of the living entity, by which the master acts as a fool. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada states, the demigods in the higher planets are called devas because they are all devotees of Lord Vishnu. Whereas all others are asuras. That is the division of the devas and the asuras. Devas are situated in the mode of goodness of material nature, whereas the asuras are situated in the mode of passion or ignorance. So the demigods, they are situated in the mode of goodness. Everything else is situated in the mode of ignorance. So why should we be blamed when we act ignorantly? That is how we are designed. So why should we be blamed? Just as we wouldn't blame a cat for stealing a fish. So why should the loved entities be blamed for being ignorant when they were created in the mode of ignorance?
Very good question. Prabhupada answered this question in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, text number 27. Prabhupada said, Ishadvesha samutena dvandva moena bharata sarvabhutani samuham sarge yanti parantapa. O sign of Bharat, of the four, O conqueror of the four, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities. Now, this is the answer. Arising from desire and hate. When you go to the purport, the purport explained, the real constitutional position of the living entity is that of subordination to the Supreme Lord, who is pure knowledge. When one is deluded into separation from this pure knowledge, it becomes controlled by the illusory energy and cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The illusory energy is manifested in the duality of desire and hate. Due to desire and hate, the ignorant person wants to become one with the Supreme Lord and envies Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pure devotees who are not deluded or contaminated by desire and hate can understand that the Lord Sri Krishna appears by his infernal potencies. This is the answer to your question, Prophet. The living entity is not free from blame because he is not put in that condition. The condition that you are explaining is as a result of his reaction, of his action. It is his action that has put him in that particular. The categorization of goodness, passion, and ignorance are ashrams, or they are like houses or cage in which the living entities are occupied based on their activities. The only property of the living entity is the ability to desire. That is what is called independence. That is the independence. It doesn't have any independence, but its independency is dependent, like we say, in the independency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when the living entity got that independency to desire what he likes, based on his desire, he chooses to either love God or hate God. So Lord Krishna told Arjuna that his conditional life is the conditional life of the living entity is born out of desire and his hate. And the story of the prodigal son suffices most often times when we talk about this situation. So the living entity cannot be free from blame because he is not put in that situation by force. It is based on his desire that the living entity finds himself in that situation. It's just like a good example that somebody goes to a canteen or a restaurant and is given a menu book and he sees, oh, sandwich toasted with this ingredient and that ingredient. And because of the sweetness of the language, because he is ignorant, he is not aware of what that he thinks when they said sweet salad. He's thinking that some sweetness, but it's sour. So if he makes an order, please give me this menu. And when he gets it, he says, oh, this is very bitter. I don't like it. Even when he doesn't like it, he's not free from the responsibility of paying for it. In fact, if he says he's not going to pay for it, he will have to be punished, put behind the bar, or made to wash plates like they do in Nigeria. So it is what it desires that puts the living entity in that condition. That being placed in the condition, not life, is not the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead permits that, but it's not the one that instigates the living entities to his choice. It gives the living entities the ability to make his choice. And based on his choices, he gets that kind of his conditional life. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it answers if you are trying to say that the living entities existed before Lord Brahma's creation. And based on their desires and hate, they were put into this mode of ignorance. Otherwise, it wouldn't, excuse me, my language, it wouldn't make sense that some living entities will be created in the mode of goodness and some in the mode of ignorance. And yet, we get blamed for acting ignorantly. Except it only makes sense to me as I'm sitting here, if being created in the mode of ignorance is as a result of my own creation in my previous existence before Lord Brahma created me. If that is what it is, then I accept it. Otherwise,
that's what Lord Krishna told Arjuna. Mama Evam so Jiva Loke, Jiva Buddha Sanatana. The living entity is eternal. He told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, both me and you, we've existed. I'll remember, but you have forgotten because you have changed your bodies. So the living entity existed before the creation, because the living entity is not some secondary creation. It's eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is his identity. That is his constitutional identity. That is part and parcel of that eternal, blissful, knowledgeable personality of Godhead. And based on his choice, he enters into different circumstances just to fulfill his desires. So Lord Brahma simply creates different bodies, just like we're hearing Maitreya explaining it to Vidura here. All these different kinds of bodies are just forms, just like an engineer makes a motor vehicle. When we say motor vehicle, a motor vehicle can be put inside a luxury body or a car body or aeroplane body, but it's a motor. So, and that depends on the capacity of the motor. It depends on the kind of bodies that is put inside. So, in the same way, the living entities are put in the different kinds of bodies based on the kind of desire they have attracted, that they've created by themselves. So, the living entity exists eternally. There's never a time the living entity does not exist. It's all ever existing. Krishna even said that in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. He said, he's never born, neither does he die. He is ever existing. That is the statement of the Supreme Personality of God. And there is no other truth that can be superior to his truth. Because himself said that. He said, there is no truth superior to me. Everything is manifesting from me. So the conception that living entity was created at some point in creation is another illusion. Living entity exists, but the manifestation of the different bodies are secondary creations. They manifest at different times. And that is why it is said that eternally, the time in the kingdom, in the supreme kingdom of God, is conspicuously absent because you can't put a time to it. Just like you can't put that time to it, you can't put the time to the age of the living entity. What the conception that I'm 50 years old, 40 years old is when I take this body. But the living entity eternally exists. And that is what knowledge, what is the name of this king? This king that Chitraketu's son was teaching him, was asking him, you say you're my father. which of my father are you? Because I've had several fathers. I've had several mothers. So which of my fathers are you? So living entities have existed. before the creation. So its manifestation within the period of the creation is a secondary manifestation of the living entity, but living entities has eternally existed. That is the value of the scriptures.
Well, thank you. I was quite surprised at, in a pleasant way, because Lord Chaitanya taught us that we should be as humble as a blade of grass and be tolerant as a tree. And I've always been asking, what is Lord Chaitanya talking about? The trees, like in the West, the trees stand out there in a very, very harsh, hot weather. They're standing out there in a very bone-chilling cold. They're standing out there, and they tolerate. How can me tolerate such weather conditions? And I always used to think that because they are trees, they have no pain. But if Lord Chaitanya is saying that they tolerate, which means that there should be some pain. And one of the verses we treated today,
talks about the pain of
the trees.
Yeah.
It says, all the immovable trees and plants seek their subsistence upwards. They are almost unconscious, but have feelings of pain within.
Exactly.
And so I said, wow, we got to be very careful. So they have pains, but their pain is different from the pains human beings and other animals experience, but the pain is there. And therefore, it makes perfect sense that Lord Chaitanya says we should tolerate. So I just wanted to highlight that. And also, talking about lower creatures that are influenced by foolishness and ignorance, they can only sense their desirables by smell, the sense of olfactory. And I was thinking, so I actually did some research on this, and it's amazing. A scientist can really settle down and read these Vedic scriptures. I mean, scientists know about the way these creatures act and behave, but they don't seem to understand where it is coming from. For example, it is said that African elephants are considered to have the strongest sense of smell among all land animals. Elephants use their trunks to detect water sources from miles away. They don't have to see it. Just by their trunks, they can detect a body of water miles away, and they will go to that direction to drink water. Snakes, I was astounded by this. Snakes, when they raise their forked tongue, they are also able to, let me read it here. It's very interesting. It says, snakes use their forked tongues and Jacobson's organ to pick up and analyze scent particles in the air, compensating for their poor eyesight. So snakes, they have big eyes, but they cannot really see much. But by the power of the smell, they are able to smell if there is danger, if there is prey, and they're able to attack. How beautiful Lord Brahma is. So this explains why the Lord Brahma's mind of creating is as good as the Lord's. It's very interesting. Well, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji, for speaking.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it is interesting when we look at the creation That is why it is said that the first quality of a spiritualist is humility. Because the greatest of the greatest scientists, they accept that Krishna is the supreme personality of God. So when somebody is claiming some level of knowledge independently, it's actually exhibition of ignorance. It means that person knows nothing. And that corroborates what the Englishman says. Empty barrels makes the loudest of noise. So the more empty the one is, the more makes noise. But when one becomes actually equipped in knowledge, he speaks less because he realizes that there is so much that is beyond his capacity. And then because of that knowledge of his limited position, he simply does what? He just simply humbles himself. So when you, that is why they say that when one wants to see who is an advanced devotee, then you see how much that person is humble. And when you look at our chariots, and who can be more humble than Srila Prabhupada in our own time? Srila Prabhupada, although he's a Shakti Avesh avatar, he said he will constantly say, he said, I'm an old man. I have no capacity to do anything. But he was preaching. He sleeps less than 2 hours every day. Who among all of his disciples can do this? None. If he was traveling like this, like the breeze. But who can do that without crashing? It's not possible. But still, he humbles himself. He said, I can't do anything. Only by your mercy, only by your support, only I'm able to do whatever I'm doing for my spiritual master. So this is the mood of the devotee, because those who are pure devotees, you know them because they become humble, because when they realize, realization brings humility. The jewel of bhakti, of realization, is humility. And that's why Lord Krishna stated it in the Bhagavad Gita. Of all the 20 qualities, Krishna says, these 20 qualities constitute the qualities of realization. But among all of these 20 qualities, a mandatory one, number one is humility. And that was what I was sharing earlier before the class, because I said the foolishness of the politicians and so-called educationists, and their frustration is only based on the fact that they claim to know when they know nothing. I said, we're going to be sitting for 2 days. You can imagine how many millions of nairas that is going to be spent in these 2 days to be talking about what? Talking about something that is not relevant to the reality of what is happening. Because everything is being given. Why don't you study? Just study this Srimad Bhagavatam, and everything will be clear. But we want to spend and then speculate and speak so many grammar and so many things, but at the end of the day, the solution is here in the Bhagavatam. And that's why it is said, Bhagavatam answereth all things. Because it's the realization of the words spoken by the Supreme Personality of God himself.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Anyone else with something to ask or to share, to add? Yeah, Madhavan Prabhu, please you may unmute.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Salika.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for Hare Krishna. Welcome. So, Hare Krishna. So, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you for the successful burial of your father.
Thank you.
Even though, so, may so rest in peace.
Thank you.
Yes. So, the time you are answering the question which was raised by Saturday Prabhu about the living entity being foolish or whatever. My thought went to, according to your explanation, as if Lord Brahma is an engineer that designed different vehicles. So the different entities enter the different vehicles. So, but the living entity itself is eternal. But Lord Brahma designed different vehicles. That was my perception, according to your explanation. My question or my concern also from the from the scriptures of Bhagavatam or Gita, talks mostly about knowledge and breaking. Okay, let me update. Okay. So throughout the Vedic text, like Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and so on, they hardly make mention of brain. But what was discussed mostly was about knowledge, mind, intelligence, the art. So what's the position of the brain? Can we just expatiate on it?
The position of what?
Brain. Brain was mentioned. Brain. The brain.
Okay, the brain.
Yes.
The human brain.
They hardly mentioned. Yeah. We know about the mind, the intelligence, the art, and so even knowledge also. So what's the position of the brain when somebody has a brain? Can we expatiate?
Dr. Sahadev maybe
okay.
Maybe able to help us on that, but I can speculate a little bit.
Okay.
According to the Vedic understanding, the brain is viewed as a physical organ or an instrument or enabler for the mind and consciousness, rather than the source of consciousness itself. According to the Vedic scriptures, the Vedic scripture distinguishes between the physical brain, which is a part of the human body located in the region of the head, and the subtle mind that we cannot see but we know that exists, and that of the consciousness itself, or the lived soul, the soul. So the brain is just a physical, just like we say the material body is not the living entity. When we say Atma in Vedic word, sometimes the word Atma will be used to describe the body. Sometimes it's used to describe the mind. Sometimes it's used to describe the soul. So depending on the perception or the level of consciousness of the person speaking, the word Atma is described in a different way. In the same way, the brain is described as an enabler or something that expresses the expression of the mind. So in the human body, there is what we call the brain. A good example is when we say the living entity is seated on the region of in the heart. The heart of the living entity, we have had this conversation sometime, and then we start asking, where is the heart of the ant?
Yeah.
The ant has its own heart, but we can't see it. So same thing with the brain. The brain, there is a physical structure, part of the body that is called the brain. But when you go deeper to describing the brain, it's just, okay, a good example We're talking about the hand. We can see the physical hand.
Yeah.
But this hand, we know as a scientist, as a spiritual scientist, that this is not the hand that is moving things. It's just the physical structure that physically carries things. But it's not this physical hand that actually that makes the hand to work. There is something behind it. Or when we say we are seeing, I'm seeing Madhuvan Prabhu with my two eyes.
Yeah.
We see two physical eyes, but we know that behind these two physical balls called the eyes, there is something behind it that makes the eye to see scientifically. And when we go even beyond the science, we know that there is something. The eye, which is the eye of the Lord, is the enabler. So the brain is a kind of an enabler, but depending on the level of the person's consciousness of the person speaking, the brain could be the physical small portion of the head that is called the brain, and it could be something beyond this physical to the subtle or spiritual. So that is what the brain is like, just like every other part of the structure of the body, especially the three subtle body of the living entity. I hope that helps in some way.
Thank you. I think you tried, but it appears a very difficult question because it's like the brain is like the combination of the intelligence, the mind, the heart. Because the brain is like containing memory and processing knowledge, or I don't know. It's complex, but thank you very much. I think you tried.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
God Almighty.
I don't know, maybe the study probably can do a little bit. I don't know.
I think that was an answer. The brain, like Salika Prabhu was saying, is just a physical organ. I mean, like if we all drive in cars and the car is physical, but it has different compartments. The tire is there, the alternator is there. And so if the alternator is not working right, then you'll not be able to start your car. If the tires are not good, then you'll not be able to move the car. If the bulb is burnt, then you'll not be able to see in the dark. So even though it's one car, but there are different compartments. So the brain is one organ, but it has different compartments. There is a portion of the brain that helps us to remember past events. There is a part of the brain that helps us recognize things that are familiar to us. So these things are there, and if there is a problem with a particular part of the brain, then it hinders our ability to function in that way. But the mind is subtle. The mind is subtle, so it's not a physical organ. So neuroscientists describe the brain as hardware and then the mind as software. In other words, hardware, like if you buy a computer, it comes with hardware. It comes with preloaded stuff in the computer or in the laptop. And then you can add other softwares, other things you would like to add to the hardware you do. So the mind is software which helps us with what we want to do, what we do not want to do. So I think what Salika Prabhu was explaining is pretty good. It's a very complex and deep subject matter, cannot be discussed in a few minutes. But I think Salika did a very good job. We also wanted to share with you, like Madhavan Prabhu said,
Yeah, Prabhu, before you go for that to another topic, I just wanted to acknowledge your point. You gave a very good example like that of the car. And in our modern cars, in the past, in the old cars, you don't have a brain box. But most of the recent cars, they have what a component that is called the brain box of the car. And and that is why we call it an enabler or a transmitter, because all informations, when and that is why in modern cars, you see when they have issues, they bring something, a kind of a gadget to go connect to the brain box, and the brain box transmit and say, this is where the problem is. This is where the problem is. So in the same way, in the human body, the brain is something like that brain box in the car. So when the vein, when like maybe you have a cut in your hand, information is transmitted to the brain immediately, and it reacts to that, and it manifests in different ways. But it's a kind of, and that's why they call it an enabler or a transmitter, because it's a base where information that transmits to all other things, every other things comes in there, and it transmits it or it enables it. You see that it enables something or it transmits certain information, but it collects information from different sources. So, and thank you very much for using that example, Sadiq. It makes it more easier.
Thank you.
Like the brain.
That's a CPU. They call it CPU.
Exactly.
It's called CPU. Central Processing Unit.
Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Exactly.
Well, Hare Krishna, thank you, devotees. Today is Ekadashi at your end, right? Our Ekadashi was yesterday here. But 2 weeks ago, which was also an Ekadashi day, our dearest brother here, Salika Prabhu, lost his dad, his biological father. And that is part of the reason why he's not been seen in our association lately, because he was busy arranging for the necessary and required last respect to be given to his departed father. So, fortunately or unfortunately, his father lived to be 90. So here he is.
Actually, that was old 90. It's actually 94. That was when he celebrated 90th birthday.
It was at 90. Okay, 94. Oh, what a wonderful. Because, you know, in most parts of Africa, our expected lifespan is like mostly in the 60s. So for someone in Africa to be 94 and still able to do things for himself in itself is a blessing. But because his son is a devotee of the Lord, this is what makes Krishna so sweet to be worshipped and to be served. Because even in human language, it is said that when someone loves you, he will take care of your dog. So if we are able to please Krishna because of our service to Krishna, everything in connection with us as bhaktas of the Lord also benefit from the Lord. So we humbly request all the devotees to kindly remember Salika Prabhu's father in his transition to definitely a better environment, a better dimension than what he had on this earth planet. This is our humblest request to you all, that to pray for the departed soul to have a better destination. Of course, that is the But just like Srila Prabhupada, when he was ill, the devotees asked Srila Prabhupada to pray to Krishna so that Krishna may keep him here a little longer for us, because they were all like very new in devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada said, you should pray to Krishna like that. Pray to Krishna that you want your spiritual master to be here a little longer. And the disciples said, Srila Prabhupada, who are we? We cannot speak to Krishna. You can. And Srila Prabhupada says, no, you are all devotees of the Lord. So as insignificant as we may think ourselves to be, and of course we are insignificant, but we have this benefit and merit of being devotees, and therefore we can also speak to Krishna. So we humbly request all the devotees to pray to Krishna for a successful transition of this wonderful departed soul, who by his grace and mercy has given us a soul like SALIKA Prabhu, whom we all adore. So we're going to humbly end this class, but we're also going to request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and we all chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra.
Sadhu Prabhu, before you go, I just wanted to share something.
Please.
Thank you very much for this.
Yes.
And it is important because I felt I should share this because sometimes when we say philosophy, it sounds philosophical to us, but Krishna consciousness is real. It is not accidental that something happens in a particular way. And how we come into this material world is unique. My dad wasn't a regular devotee, but this is one thing about him. His birth, he was born on a Sunday, on an Ekadasi day. When I started checking, I came to realize that he was born on an Ekadasi day. And the day he was going to leave, it was also falls on a Sunday and on a Ekadasi day. So when I was checking the calendar, I was completely marveled. I said, what is this? So it is not accidental that Krishna arranges for the living entities to come in a particular way. He was not a regular devotee. So I remember when I joined devotional service, initially he was not accepting. He said, what is this? So he went by himself, make inquiries, and he said, okay. And then he came to the temple to visit me. He stayed in the temple for a week, took prasadam, stayed for me with some time. So, but I was praying that when I was about to travel to Mexico, something was telling me that if I traveled, I won't meet this man again. And I decided to go to see him just about 3 days before I traveled. And I went to see him, we chatted and come. And I said, that you know that according to tradition, when you leave, I cannot kill a cow. I know you will forgive me. I've told you this before. I know you are not living now, but I desire that whenever you are going to leave, I should be opportune to have devotees to do ceremony and then chant. He said, yes, well, why not? Why not? That is very good. Devotees should chant Hare Krishna. So he said, we said this casually. I never knew that was the last conversation we were going to be having. So I traveled. And I was in Mexico when I was called that it was about leaving. So immediately I came back and he left. So somehow or the other, I could not get devotees to give him Ganga water, which I desired the day he was about to leave. But when I got there, when we were going to do the burial, what was supposedly supposed to be something like unusual thing, all the family members said, we cannot do this ceremony, although we couldn't get your people to come on the day we are burying him as a Muslim, but we want them to, we will not complete this ceremony unless the devotee comes. So I was so shocked. I said, how is this? Because of course, everybody knows I'm a devotee, but for them to request like that to the biggest person in the family who I've never met over 30 years, they were all just saying that you have to bring your people to do the last ritual for him because he just desires, it's what he desired. So because of that, everybody's request. So I brought devotees and we chant Brahma Savita, we chant Asupanishad, and we have a powerful kirtan at his graveside. It was a very powerful experience. I was so blissful. That day I felt happy that I'm a devotee of Hare Krishna. So I just wanted to share that.
Salika Prabhuki. Salika Prabhuki.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you for sharing that, Salika Prabhu. What makes this unusual is that Salika Prabhu was born a Muslim. His dad was a Muslim. And usually, under normal circumstances, they wouldn't have wanted any other tradition to get involved in the last rites of their loved one. But here is the case. They wholeheartedly embraced the devotees. So that is very, very amazing and wonderful. So again, Salika Prabhu, thank you for making time to share with us this Nectarian Srimad Bhagavatam, and also sharing with us the passing of your dad. It's a situation we all mourn with you. We do not mourn for you. We mourn with you, because it's always difficult losing parents. Even though we know the philosophy that the physical loss is always difficult, but we know and we believe that we are all here with you. We are all for each other. So you're not alone.
Thank you so much.
Devotees, we humbly going to request you all to unmute, and we chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra for the departed soul. Please, you may all unmute. Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram,
Hare Rama, Hare Hare.
Panchakapavataru Vyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Sevascha Patiganam Pavashnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
Ananta Vaishnava Ki all glories to His Grace Salika Prabhu Ki
All glories to His Grace Prabhupada Ki Jai.
To the father of Salika Prabhu Ki Jai.
For the attention of Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you all devotees.